all very, it's just like you said, I've got to love them and closer. So thank you all so much for coming. Saturday, Easter Saturday. So that's great. I hope I can manage 3 hands, because I want to read at some point as well. Anyway, thank you also, Gregory. So I wrote this book when I realized that I had witnessed and taken part in a way of life that had been farming method that had been going for thousands of years. I've got to have 2 hands now. And as you can see, okay, so as you can see in this frieze, this fragment of a Turkish frieze, there's a threshing sledge there. Do you see the flints underneath? The flint stones? So that was the kind of threshing sledge they were still using when I went to Spain. So I go here. Of course, I had no such lofty ideas when I first went there, which was in the 60s. All I wanted was a nice holiday and somewhere where my children could run free. Now this is where it might get tricky. Stifling London suburbia was no place for 4-year-old Miles and Anthony, my deaf 6-year-old son, to spend their 2-month holidays. More importantly, I wanted my children to experience another culture, not have them growing up believing the only correct way to live was the British way, and that success equated money. No, I wanted a magical childhood for my boys, for them to run feral, roam the unseen worlds of their imagination as I had on Devon's heather moors. I'd had my chance. Now it was their turn, before formal do's and don'ts forever cemented my children into a British mould. So here is the Picos. Oh, using a proverbial pin, we were lucky enough to find this tiny village in the Picos to Europa. And here are just a couple of views of the mountains. So why, when cows wore shoes? Well, patently they did, because here is the cow being shod. And if you notice the strange gadget, they hooked them up in. They had a leather belt, which with a cog they could hook up. And if you like, I will pass a real cow shoe around the room. And here's a gadget which I saw a PBS documentary recently on the Santa Fe Trail. And there, to my amazement, was a gadget, a contraption just like this. So cows must have worn shoes in America. So the nearest town was Tervera de Pisuerga, with pillared walkways. And when we first went there, cows wandered in the streets. But you can see there's actually a car there. And it's a very pretty town to this day.
Liz, closer, kiss the mic. Yeah.
You mean to tell me you really can't? Is this it? Okay. Lip is on it. Thank you. So here when I talk of we, this is we, my 2 boys, Anthony and Miles, and the man I had erroneously thought would be my life partner. So what, can I give you this actually?
Yes.
Because I can't give you the mic apparently. So rounding the bend.
Oh, there you go.
Oh!
We wanted to see you.
Well, this is going to be fun, I can tell. Well, anyway, rounding the final bend after it's 4 kilometers from the Tervera, there stood the village. No village could be more perfectly dreamt up. A church, a winding lane, a row of stone houses, the slope of curved red clay roofs, each stone, each tile tightly gripped in place like pieces of a jigsaw. To complete the picture, a cluster of poplar trees cradled a sun-dappled pool in the river. Wanting to cry, I burst out laughing instead. As we crossed the stone bridge over the mighty divide into the sunlit village on the far side, I had a clear feeling I had penetrated the curtain wall of a castle keep, been granted entry into the magical, unknown world of the future. I was right to feel as I did. We all four of us lost our edges, became gentler, well-rounded people, boys and me in head. Absorbed more knowledge from those 11 summers in Spain than any of us could have imagined. So, well, I've got to go click, click, click. Hang on a minute. Back here. So here is the village. Click, click. That is the courtyard, the quadra of our friends. So as we drove up, I thought, my God, what have I done? There's no shop, there's no plaza, no cafe, and even more difficult, hardly any Spanish. We had 5 words. Buenos dias, adios, gracias, and that was a mistake, because they never used gracias in the village. In fact, we were told off. Do you think you're priests? Do you think you're priests? Gracias, gracias. So it was very hard to change a habit of a lifetime. They felt you obligated them to something if you said thank you.
Interesting.
And so this is the lovely lady of the house, Mercedes. You should see her with her washing board. She came out to greet us out of the one sign that said Quantitas. So these are just the village and scenes. And it may look idyllic, but as you can see, set in the wall, a hollow log, and I asked the guy who lived there, Mariano, a really soft, gentle guy, why is that in the wall? He said, it's my house for the bees. They fly in, and I go upstairs, and I take out the honey, and then, being a simple man, he sort of licked his lips. And it may look idyllic, but in fact, Franco, there was a divide in the village, unseen, that we didn't know about for a couple of years. The pro-Franco lot of fascists in the church at one end of the village, in the upper bar, and then down where we were, the anti-fascists. And to denote their political allegiance, they tilted their boinas, their berets, to the left or to the right. And if they didn't want you to know, straight. So here you are. Franco wanted ears and eyes on the ground. So he posted 2 guardia in every village, usually dragging some poor country boy away from his home, never having left it before, to make sure that he knew nobody where he was being posted. And they had a 2 years posting. But again, the same Mariano, I asked him, because he seemed a very gentle, simple guy. I said, so what did you do? He said, they took away my gun. But just imagine it, because I never saw a gun there. Then he said, they gave me a whistle. And again, he acted. He went, and I held up my hand, and cars stopped. Then I went like this, and they all started going. So the chaos that must have been in that time would be quite funny to see. And here is, I'll let you see the cast of characters. This is Juan, who ran the bar, and Alejandro, who became my partner's really good friend, and it was an unlikely friendship, an Oxford scholar and a man who supposedly is illiterate. We judge them illiterate, but in fact this man had great knowledge. He could read the furrows, read the leaves and the seasons, and read the history of the village and the land. And that's his pal too. So the 3 of them was one other man. They were the ones who became the professors, our professors. And they started with, I can't quite do it with one hand. Let's say our first verse of Spanish, un vaso, vino, y beber. And so those were our first 3 words. And this is the family who we really became our friends. This man was reputed to eat grass, he and his sister. So they weren't always kind to each other in the village. And here's the old lady in her 80s, whose hair had never been washed in all those years. I'd catch her sitting on an upturned bucket and her daughter brushing her beautiful silver hair, glossy, thick. That's her daughter, and the Mariana, who is the softie. And here is Angel, Senor Angel, blind. And we'd sit on the wall together, and I learned to see as he saw. I learned that you could see without seeing the cows, the carts coming by, creak of the carts, the bells around their necks, the call of the chickens from over somebody's yard. And here's a really lovely friend, Upiano, who was a miner, who worked up to his hips in water. And 6 weeks before he retired, he had an accident. And because he'd not fulfilled his full years, they wouldn't give him a pension. And here is another lovely guy. He's called El Rey because he was a king. He was all 4 foot, and his oversized coat trailed behind him like an ermine cape. Some lovely characters in the bar. El Borracho, clearly on his way. And bar life seemed to be absolutely part of their life. They started at the bar with a glass of wine in the morning for breakfast, and seemed to drink steadily throughout the day without getting drunk. And as I said, I wanted this time to be for my children to develop their imagination and run free. So I'll just go rather quickly through these slides, and you can see my deaf son there. Do you see his long cord?
Yeah.
With my old-fashioned hearing aid, but it didn't matter because it just got on together, communicated. So finally they start helping and doing tasks, joining in the tasks of the village. This is the first year. This is outside the bar, one of the walls. We seem to sit on walls. And in fact, Alejandro thought we were sun worshippers from across the water. That was the nearest he could get to understanding abroad, foreigner. See, of course, was not schooled. And for me, this picture illustrates Schumacher's Small is Beautiful. Everybody helping everyone. Small village. And when Juan's mother wandered vacantly looking for her past life and smelling of urine, somebody would just take her hand and lead her home. And then there was a pre-teenage young boy in the village, and he always had a piece of string that he walked around with. And again, he was totally accepted. For that, Small is Beautiful was a big part of it. So the first year we were able to live in the one bar, the lower bar, the Huanon, and for the price of a pack of cigarettes, 4 people, 4 meals, was it 3? I can't remember, and wine. So we dressed up like they did because we wanted to become embedded. We dressed up, joined the penitentes, danced in there's my son in there, and danced with people they're not really dressed up there. And that's older when he's older. But we became part of the village, that was the aim. It was the first year, of course, as observers, strangers, and the second year perhaps as well. So people that used to annoy me and say, what do you do all the time going to the same village every year? No television, no shops. We'd say, well, we like you, we get up, get dressed, have breakfast, and plenty to do. So you can just see some of these in the next village, playing bowls. And the first 2 years, of course, not working with the people yet, We had time to swim, go on expeditions. This is our favourite swimming hole.
Nice.
So you can see there. And then the pound dropped. Third year, devalued. So suddenly we couldn't afford to be in the Huanan anymore. And what were we going to do? It was just a few weeks before we left for our summer. So some, let's say, inebriated friends of my partner in the London pub said, I know where we can get a tent. And they went and nicked, but still, a tent out of somebody's front garden. And of course they'd get it back 2 months later, but that was their joke. But anyway, it was a Toy Town tent. With no idea that you have to have a fly sheet is it called, and a sort of ditch around the tents. So this is where we were, up the field. You can see the terrible, awful camping, we had no idea. But anyway.
He's not happy.
But to my amazement, I found I loved camp life. And this is where it's going to get. Find the page with one hand. Camping suited me. The slow routine, the connection to the earth, the time it gave me to unravel tangles from corners of my brain I'd been unaware of. My unconscious way, I realize now, of escaping the unpredictable pattern of my London life. The wristwatch had no place for me in Spain, where Rovesca's days were governed by the heavens and our stomachs. Not quite day, not quite dusk, no deadline by which to lay a fire and prep the food and get the cooking underway. I liked to settle on the log beside the fire pit and sit bare-toed doing nothing but listen to the shadows creeping through the meadow grass and hear stories whispered by the apple leaves in the orchard. So I really found that I liked it, especially when we had a proper tent, which was the next year. Now let's see if I got it the right way up. So people just called on us, it was like your home, and they called our tent, the next year's one, the good tent, the Palace of Cotton. And we then became really part of the village. This is the chicken truck that came once a week. I paid extra to have the chicken without its feathers. And then this third year, now we were camping, we were fully accepted by the village. And we started going up the mountains with them and helping with the hay, helping with the harvest, taking the cows to pasture. And you can see here, helping them put the yoke on, or at least watching. Well, finally, what we'd waited for, harvest time. We could really start finally to join in village life. As harvest approached, Alejandro spoke of nothing but. Twice, 3 times a day, he stared at his fields, rechecking for the green tinge colouring the hillside to ripen to gold. In the short window of harvest, Huesca's normally sleepy lanes erupted with a soft thunk of cowbells and crunch of rolling carts. Unhurried, cows still plodded, women prepared meals, and men took time to down a vino or two at the bar. But I could feel the shift, the raring to begin, the urge to be the first family to bring in the harvest. Is the crop ripe yet? Is it hot enough? Caught up in his anxiety, we too pestered Alejandro, scanning the sky, the yellowness of the oats. Yes, so we go up, and then when we got to the upper fields, to my surprise, instead of just reaching for a scythe and start getting straight to work, he sank to the ground and began to, with something that looked like a railway spike, which he hammered into the earth, and along it, he tapped serrations into the whole length of the scythe. We're so used to going out to buy a saw or a bread knife serrated, but they had to make serrations. And that was an eye-opener. And then, of course, we watched the scything. Men scythed, on the whole women didn't. In fact, unless they're widowed or single solar. So here, learning to scythe, and I did women's work, raking and brushing. I'll just go back to that one. Lena's, Manuela's task and mine was to finish up, winkle every seed of grain and yellow stalk from the stubble, one a little behind the other, a team, me raking and she with her besom sweeping. Dreamily I groomed each furrow, treading lightly on the earth. I became aware only of the pull of wooden teeth, the lift and swing of my arms. I was the rake, I was the grain, I was each step I took. How simple my life would be if in my English life I focused on a single moment, just one thought, one footstep, and one worry at a time. So the idea of a harvest was that you went up to the upper fields because it was a strip field system, so each family had many fields spread out all over the village in the fertile land as well as infertile to make it fair. And you brought the grain down, loaded the carts, and brought them. Oh, we always had to stop for a merry end. Wine, cheese, ham on, in the middle of work every afternoon. And so then down we'd go with a laden cart. That's the whole family, that's me there. My two boys up in the front. I'm sort of in the middle there. And now we're going up onto the era. The era being the threshing floor, which was a communal threshing floor for the whole village. So each family had its own patch, and you collected the wheat and put it in a circle, a corona they called it, to dry overnight. Then the next morning, before the cows had been, got to work, you had to aerate it, this part here. They aerated it to make it about deep, so you can see how deep it is there, so that it would dry. And then an hour or two later, the cows down from the mountains, they'd start, there they are spreading the corona, they'd start to bring the sledges. And two at a time, there's Leandro, one-eyed Leandro, you can sort of see the size, and each family would perhaps have two pairs going round and round at the same time. That's my son. When I tried, they were off home. They didn't do anything I said. Allez, allez. But anyway, and behind you can see the monton of the harvest, which had been threshed. And it would only take about perhaps 2.5 hours for the long stems of wheat to turn to chaff. And I don't know if you see a bucket. You had, every time the cow lifted its tail, you had to dash with the bucket so the crop wasn't ruined. But anyway, you can see it's great fun, and the whole area would erupt with calls and happy calls for all the families, particularly on the first day of threshing, because it seemed that everyone timed it together. As you can see, they love to play the fool, but also work really hard. That's my son working. You can see the monton. Now this, to me, is the most beautiful scene from the reservoir down. You could look down onto the threshing floor, which seems sheltered by all the backs of the barns and the houses. And you can see each field's corona, how they've collected a circle they're working on, and then you didn't winnow it each day. You waited till every single grain was in. Then you had to scrape it up the end of each day, people would run from other families to jump on this funny scraper thing, which I cannot remember its name, and scrape it up into that monton, and the cows would charge through it and people would fall off. It was great laughter. And then finally, when all the grain is in, this weird machine was trundled up onto the air, and it's called a belladora, a winnowing machine. That's my youngest. Hard at work, had to be helped. So 2 people loaded the hopper, and the stones shot out one side, the chaff another, and then this side, they collected all the grain in those beautiful woven sacks. And that, 16 grains, that's the end of the harvest. That's enough to feed one family, there were 5 of them, for a full year, and pay the miller. 1 sack for the miller, and the rest for bread. That was just a mystery to me. So now with harvest over, it's time to drink again. And this was where we normally met them, in the downstairs hall, a little sort of room that they kept. And we'd never been upstairs, so this was the first time that we went upstairs. And the kitchen was just the one room with 2 bedrooms off it. There's one with 1 bed for the men. The 2 brothers had to sleep together. And then the 2 women, until she was married, the daughter was married off, they had the other room. And that's it. That's the other son, who you can't see, but he's got a withered hand, the one holding the jug. And it was a sad tale. Well, at the end of Fiesta, which is, by the way, about 5 courses, they love to have a cigar, a puro, and their brandy. And when you think how poor they were, with no money, they still were able to live in a wonderful way. And we used to say, "You're the millionaires, millonarios." And they'd say, "You're the millionaires," because we had a car and a fridge. We had a fridge at home. And so there you can see, pretty jolly. Forget children not drinking under the age of. And so now Honna and Ulpiano are really good friends, the ones that were more modern, decided to take us on a picnic. So up the mountain she took us, while her husband, Ulpiano, and his hunter friend, this is a shepherd on the way, this hunter friend, who was a taxidermist, they'd gone ahead a different route to prepare the picnic. The chicken, rabbit, who knew what was going to happen, tortilla, of course. And as we climbed over the mountain on the far side of the upper valley, the next valley, we could see a little plume of smoke, their fire, under a beautiful rowan tree. And instead of greeting us, "Hello, hello," they said, "What can you smell?" Smell? Oh, rabbit, chicken, something nice bubbling on the pot. "No, smell again, smell the earth." "Nothing? No, grass? Thyme? No, smell again." And with that, boom, out came that bottle of wine. So they'd embedded this whole upper valley with bottles of wine. And this man told us his tale, El Cazador. It's a lovely tale about how he got his scar, but I don't think it's time. Anyway, he told us that he and his friend during the Civil War had been captured and were being made to dig their graves. And as they dug their graves, the soldiers were lolling, were drinking, watching them. They said, "We're going to die, so let's make a run for it. You will throw the shovel full of dirt at them, and hurl the spades as well, and then you go that way, I'll go that." So they did. They both escaped, and he lived up in the upper valley for 2 full years. And he was the one who decided, "Never again will I be without my wine." Yes. Anyway, here's a bit of the picnic. That's difficult, actually. He used to like to do it on his forehead. This is all piano. So it trickled down his nose, through his bigote, and he'd catch it in his mouth. And that's his lovely wife, Juana. So now, as we were going home, and we were going home the way the men went, the two men disappeared. And suddenly popped out again laughing with a bottle of wine from his hiding place. And so we walked up the rocks and found his narrow cave where he'd spent 2 years. And of course could never cook it in the day. He had to wait till it was dark so the smoke was undetected. And his bed was heather and bracken, and there was a lot of wine in there, I'll tell you. Anyway, one year we decided to go in April. I can't quite remember why. And we were snowed up and nearly lost our lives, but that's a different story. But I was pleased because I'd be able to witness sowing. And sowing was a part of the cycle that I'd not yet seen. So we saw that, and I never did get to see ploughing, sadly, but I made up a story and a chapter to describe it. And they called these ploughs arrows romanos, so they were Roman, the same as they'd been from Roman times. And Alejandro made this one, and his father made another, and the grandfather made another. And you can see it's just a single shear. It didn't turn the sod. So it really is an ancient form. Now I'd like to read you something about that. Tomorrow I sow, tomorrow full moon. Alejandro dropped the information casually, almost coyly one evening. I can feel the earth swelling to receive my grain. I'll seed my upper fields first. I understood he spoke of earth's conception, the union of female, male. Was that the origin of the word husbandry? In, out, swing, in, out. The act more beautiful than I imagined. With the grace of a ballet superstar, his right hand disappeared inside the sack, slung over one shoulder, reappeared with a handful of grain. The simplicity of it, a lone man, a sack and seed, the rhythmic swing of stem and hand. Transfixed by the beauty of Alejandro's retreating figure, I watched him work the length of the field's dark furrows. With slow, measured strides, he broadcast perfect arcs into the air, assuring an even growth of golden grain. No? There we go. Truly was a beautiful sight. You can see how high this field was compared to others. And I was particularly excited when my children ran up and they'd found some little pieces of slate, flakes of slate, and realized they could draw on them with a stone. They discovered that, and for me that was like the highlight that they would learn that. Now here's dear Juana. After the harvest was over, we didn't have much to do, so we offered Juana and her husband Ulpiano, is there anywhere you'd like to go? And she, as you can see, she's very modern. She's not wearing black, no headscarf, no thick woolen stockings, and she's got bare arms. She said, I'd like to go to my birth home, where my sister lives. And she hadn't seen her since she'd left home to get married, left the village. So we drove into the next province of Santander. I don't know if you know the area, but quite near Fuente de, which is a big national park. We parked at the bottom, because of course there was no road, and it took us 45 minutes to an hour to walk slowly up in a narrow path, just big enough for a donkey. And as we arrived at her house, of the cluster of barns. Instead of a cry of welcome, a woman screamed in agony, seeing us arrive. A visitor meant tragedy. A visitor meant death. They were so unused to them. They lived so isolated. And as you can see, it was the happy family, including the goat. And they cooked us a fabulous meal using the bread oven and starting the whole meal from scratch. At the end of the meal, the eldest son came down and asked his dad, who's on the left, if he could, not as you would hear the boys, "Dad, may I borrow the car? Dad, may I borrow the goat?" And he was taking his girlfriend on a date. So he hopped on the goat, down the mountain he went, and I imagined them going up the other side. So now, 1975, Franco died. The fields died. The way of life died. Because he brought in, after his death, he kept everyone repressed. He didn't encourage communication between the villages. And so suddenly, Spain was burst and thrown into the 20th century too quickly. So the government came in, offered subsidies if they changed their crops to potatoes, which they did and got really well paid for 2 years then, pennies. So they threw everything into the river. They weren't going to sell their potatoes for that price. So, but it meant already the fields had died and the cows had forgotten how to work. Electricity came in, and Mercedes, who was the lady who ran the bar, not knowing when she put a beautiful new fridge that live wire and wet floor do not mix. And so she was horribly electrocuted but did live, but her whole pigment of her skin was altered. And then the bathroom salesman came and told everyone they've got to have a modern bathroom. It's got to be tiled. There's beautiful stone walls are tiled, ceiling to floor, bath, shower, basin, and bidet. This is for people who'd never had running water. So Alejandro was very excited that first summer and said, "Oh," he said, "the water comes out like this and it falls on your back." And then he made a sort of action like a duck. And I never forgot it, the duck in the rain. So sadly, machines came in and noise where there had been peace. And even in the era for threshing, they couldn't make the jump from tractor that you don't need a sledge anymore to another kind of machine to thresh. So they tied 3 sledges, one behind the other, 2 and then 1, sat on it and put rocks on 2 and sat on it with the chaff blowing in their faces. You've never seen such misery. So that was modernization. And electricity also meant when we arrived, we couldn't understand why there was a blanket over one part of the bar, the upper bar, because by then things seemed to have relaxed. You could go up there. And they said, Maria was saying, "No, you can't go in, don't go in, no, no, no." And of course we peeped. And to our amazement, it was a blue movie. And the audience were these lovely farm ladies. They were hysterically laughing. They thought this is the funniest thing they'd ever seen, because they'd only ever seen animals behave like that. So, anyway, so this is rather a sad story, where somebody offered to help him with his arm. Do you see it with it? Yeah. And so this doctor had offered to do it free. So he went off to Palencia, the capital town, and he came back 4 months later. There's pebbles thrown up at the window. "Your brother's back, your brother's back." Yes, but he was in a box. They killed him. And so medicine, everything isn't perfect about the simple life. Education, medicine, and these are just sad pictures. This was the end. And we went back. I went back with my son. It was only 4 years ago, actually. I'd just like to tell you that there still wasn't a shop. There still wasn't a new house in the place. So everything was the same, although some of the buildings, of course, had been modernized and were now Airbnbs. And boutique, had a lovely meal, great meals. And when we arrived, again, they ran out, they grabbed my arm, they pinched my cheek, and held on to my hand and wouldn't let me go, and cried and cried. They were just so happy to see us, and they remembered us. But when I say they, it looked just like the people we'd known, but in fact it was the next generation, at the age of my children. And I just have one last reading about that. So while they prepared the meal for us, because you never go anywhere without a meal being offered, of course, I wandered onto the area. Goalposts stood where once montons of grain clustered, and a group of children chased the soccer ball instead of gathering the harvest as they would have done before. I heard no echo of its brushing past, saw no faint outline of a corona imprinted in the grass. Leaving, I climbed the curving track to the lake to see again our diving rock, the lone tree still growing half in, half out the sheet of water, where my boys and I swam almost every day. And from the Places Granite Dam, I gazed down at the village and surrounding grass-covered hills, where Ruesga nestled. Contained beneath the same Red Sea of roofs, Ruesga looked as idyllic as it always had, and I realized though things were not nor could ever be as before. Despite the changes, a calm I'd yearned to feel for 50 years swept over me. The spring returned to my step. Over comida, back up the Huanon, I stared at the yoke, the hand-carved rake and fork, the framed photograph decorating the dining room wall. The black and white image I remembered I'd taken with my brownie box camera caught my eye. Juan driving a threshing sledge, his pair of cows half buried, ploughing through the sea of grain. Staring into the lens, Juan is smiling. See, all is well. Ruesga lives and has survived. That's it.
Oh.